Okay, this lecture, number 4, is about the English Reformation and the the Counter-Reformation, the Catholic reaction to it. Okay, the English Reformation, England was a likely breeding ground for Protestantism, but its advance was slow. England had a reputation for maintaining the authority of the crown against the Pope. There is a long history of back and forth between the English crown and the Pope. They were already many secret Protestants. Lollardry and humanism were also influences. So being a Lollard goes all the way back to chapter 9. Henry VIII initially supported the Pope against Luther. Henry's first wife, Catherine of Aragon, did not provide him a son. He wanted an annulment in order to marry Anne Boleyn, which was not granted. Catherine of Aragon is from Spain, highly Catholic, extremely pious Catholic. And by not being able to grant him a son, which all kings need to move their line of succession, he wanted to marry Anne Boleyn, who eventually becomes the mother of Elizabeth I. It was suggested that he declare himself supreme in English spiritual affairs, which would solve its problem. There's a picture of him. Reformation Parliament. In 1529, Parliament convened for what would be a 7-year session. Legislation passed that eventually put the clergy under the authority of the king. This takes away power from the church. In 1531, the king was made officially the head of the Church of England. So what Henry VIII did is he just created his own church. In 1532, he published official grievances against the church. And in 1534, he ended all payments to Rome and gave Henry sole jurisdiction over ecclesiastical appointments. That means bishop, archbishop, all the powerful parts within the church. That same year, the Act of Supremacy declared Henry the only supreme head of the Church of England. This Act of Supremacy is extremely important, and what it says is that he is now the head of the Church of England. Despite these changes, Henry did not make many concessions to Protestant sensibilities, retaining most of the ritual and doctrinal trappings of Catholicism. So basically, all the rituals he kept, but the parts that he didn't want, he threw those away. So, for example, if he wanted to get a divorce, he added that in, but also kept most of the Catholic dogma. Edward VI was the son of Henry VIII. When Henry died, his 10-year-old son, Edward VI, took over. Now, it's really important to keep in mind that he has 2 older sisters, Mary and Elizabeth. He ruled under several regencies, enacted a series of reforms, bringing the Church of England more in line with Protestant England. In 1553, Edward died, leaving his Catholic half-sister, Mary, as the queen. This is the daughter of Catherine of Aragon, who was the pious Catholic. She quickly reversed the reforms. Now, the Counter-Reformation, this is the reaction of the church, what I call the Empire Strikes Back or the Church Strikes Back. Even before the Reformation, Catholics had begun to make efforts at reforms, but they were squashed. Once the Reformation set in, new religious orders had begun to form. In 1524, the Theatines to groom church leaders. In 1528, monastic Capuchins, and the Jesuits were the most successful of the reform movements. So within the Catholic Church, there were reform movements to change the church. Founded by Ignatius Loyola in 1530s, it was recognized in 1540. It was based on a military model. He wanted people to be soldiers of Christ. Jesuits are extremely disciplined and highly, highly educated. He preached self-mastery through discipline, self-sacrifice, and obedience. Jesuits are a real important group. This is an important map. It shows where the strength of of the Protestant movement was and where the Catholic Church was. Now we get into the Council of Trent. The success of the Reformation forced the Church to call a general council in order to reassert doctrine. So they had to call back, reassess what they're doing, and going, whoa, this Reformation has to be dealt with. What are we going to do? In preparation, the Pope appointed liberal theologian Caspar Contarini to head a reform commission. The idea here is a reform commission. The council was strictly under the Pope's control. Its most important reforms concerned internal discipline. Bishops needed to preach regularly and spend time in their diocese. So that means that they needed to be visible to the people. Priests were required to be neatly dressed, educated, and strictly celibate. So you couldn't be going out and doing things that were against your oath. No doctrinal concessions were made to the Protestants. They reaffirmed many key doctrines such as the role of good works, the authority of tradition, and indulgences. Rulers initially resisted the reforms, but eventually the new legislation took hold. And that's where we'll stop.